anytime you're under that much tension, which is pretty much continuous, at least it was on that voyage, you need that sort of psychological relief. It's an enormous help. The reason I was crying there was I was frightened. You know, I was having a tough go at that time, no question about it. Been just hove to for 3 days, just the boat just being battered around and so on, not getting anywhere and so on. And the thing that made me cry about that particular situation was that after you've been alone, now there I hadn't spoken to anybody for 11 days, and after that amount of time, you don't really realize this until what I'm about to say happens, and that is that you have been so long without anyone recognizing you, talking to you, that you begin to question whether you really exist or not. Now, you don't think about this, but when someone comes along and says, "Oh, Jason, it's you," this is an overwhelming experience. After nothing, there's been no communication, no input whatsoever. To have someone say, "I see you, you're still there," is a very, very moving experience.
Yet you recorded that after the event.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you respond when that Dutch ship called you and said, "Are you the little sailboat?"
Well, when he said that, now I really didn't cry at that time because I was so excited to talk to him. And another thing that impressed me is I was there in this traumatic situation, you know, waves breaking over the boat, just getting the heck knocked out of me at the time and scared. And then to have this very calm Dutch voice come on and say, "Oh yes, you know, everything's fine. There are places in the world where everything is orderly," and so on. And that made me realize again that everything wasn't this way, you know, that there were parts of the world where things were all right, and that there was order and so on, instead of just this chaos and fear. So it sounds a little melodramatic to talk about it now in some ways, but at the time when you're alone, you don't have anybody else to joke around with, you don't have anybody else to bolster your spirits. A little experience like that can be overwhelming.
That was the low point of your trip. Let's come back after this commercial break and talk about the high points.
All right.
News breaks anywhere, anytime, 24 hours a day, and the Good News team is out covering the news round the clock. Channel 5's Eyewitness News is the area's only television news team that has the news and weather covered 24 hours a day. When the Hennepin Hotel caught fire, when State and St. Paul police went on a high-speed chase, when a Brooklyn Park apartment house burned, Eyewitness News was the only news team at the scenes getting you the exclusive reports. If it's news that affects you, you can count on the Eyewitness News team being there 24 hours a day.
Peter, darling, would you like to see Brett Summers, Charles Nelson Riley, Deborah Lee Scott, and...
what's his name, Fred Grandy.
And my sister in sin, Phyllis Diller.
and my good friend Bill Daly.
And
we'll all be here in the match game. Peter, won't you join us? Thank you. Goodbye.
Weekdays at 3 p.m. on Channel 5.
Alcoholism. It can tear families apart. If someone you love has a drinking problem, can you see what it's doing to you?
It's all your fault!
In Al-Anon and Alateen, people share their experience, strength, and hope. Contact Al-Anon listed in your phone book or Al-Anon Family Group headquarters.
I hate this house!
Jerry Speece, we're going to come back to your triumphant entry into Falmouth Harbor 18 months ago in a little bit. But before we talk about that, let's talk about what Jerry Speece plans to do in the future, because we've talked extensively about your past. What do you have planned?
Well, I'm getting ready right now to attempt to cross the Pacific next year. And so I'm doing a lot of things to Yankee Girl to get her squared away in preparation for that.
In the same boat?
Yes, same boat, and I...
You haven't added 20 feet?
No, if anything, I might take a foot off.
You're going to cross the Pacific?
Yes.
Now, that poses a whole new set of problems. What kind of problems do you face in the Pacific that you perhaps didn't face in the Atlantic?
Well, it's twice as far, of course. The distance is twice as great. But I will be able to stop. I plan to stop and make 3 or 4 stops on the way at various islands. I do expect to have more problems with whales out there, and despite what they say, the other night I saw a program about whales, and they said whales have never attacked a man. And, well, that's true. They attack the boats a lot, but they never attack the men. So I am trying to take some steps, hopefully, to counteract that, but there isn't too much you can do against whales.
Well, what steps can you take?
Well, you can do some things with explosives and things like that, but there isn't too much, and that would be only as a real last resort. And so basically, I try to get along with them rather than fight with them out there.
You're going to set off from where and head to where? What's the route of this this expedition?
Well, I'll leave from around Long Beach, California, and I'll go to Hawaii first. And
how long will that take?
Well,
you? That's a long way.
Yes,
10-foot boat.
It's 2/3 the distance across the Atlantic, and it should take me. I'm going to try and make it in about 30 days because I'm going to race all the way. That's what I'm going to really push this little girl this time, and try to make it very quickly. Then from Hawaii, if everything is going all right, if I'm feeling well and physically and psychologically and so on, then I will set out again after a week or 2 rest there. I go down to Samoa. From Samoa, I'll go to either Tonga or Fiji, then New Caledonia perhaps, or else Norfolk Island, and then ultimately down to Sydney if I can. But there are a lot of things that may intervene there. I wouldn't consider going on if I have any problems. I just don't, I don't take any chances like that. So everything has to be right.
What sort of problems, apart from whales, would you expect to have? What about the weather now? The weather in the Pacific, of course, one would assume would be better than the Atlantic, but that's not necessarily so, is it?
Well, the weather's really about the same in the Pacific and the Atlantic. It just depends on your latitude. Now, the problem I have to deal with here in the Pacific will be hurricanes, and there are lots of hurricanes, many more on the Pacific side than on the Atlantic side, but they usually don't come inland like they do on the Atlantic side, so you don't hear about them on the news and so on. But there were hurricanes all the way up in, I think, N's and M's and so on, as opposed to on the Atlantic side, they were in J and K or something like that. So there are a lot, there are more out on that side. And they go out to sea, and they can be very, very serious. So I'm going to try and go between those.
We have to go to a tape now of the triumphant entry into Falmouth Harbor of Jerry Speece. And I think that all our viewers would enjoy seeing this once again.
Jerry Speece still has a few miles to go, but the lonely part of this voyage is definitely over.
The spirit of adventure, which we all cherish in our hearts, but regretfully, for most of us, it's just a dream. Thank goodness, in this world of protests and cupidity, there is still real-life heroes to stir our emotions and inspire us.
That was July 1979. That was Jerry Speece arriving in Falmouth, England, after spending 54 days crossing the Atlantic. He's going to now try crossing the Pacific, and I think that I'd like to take it upon myself to, on behalf of the people of Minnesota, to wish you the very best of luck.
Well, thank you very much, Jason.
That was a...
charming March of the Wooden Soldier comes to life filled with music, song, and the comedy antics of Laurel and Hardy. Hi, I'm Timothy D. Kerr. Join me Friday night, December 19th at 12:10 a.m. for Laurel and Hardy in the March of the Wooden Soldier here on Channel 5.
It's Happy Days again, and the fun's just starting.
Give me 5.
Put it in your pocket and don't let nobody hop.
Relive the funniest moments from those fabulous 50s with a few surprises.
Go suck an egg.
The whole gang's on hand and headed your way. See 'em for Happy Days again.
Join Fonzie, Richie, and the whole gang every weekday at 4:30 p.m. here on KSTP TV, Channel 5.
KSTP TV, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Channel 5.
From ABC News, this is the Weekend Report. Now, from our desk in New York, here's Tom Jarrell.
Good evening. In an extraordinary show of devotion, millions of people from Australia to West Germany, from Paris to Los Angeles, said farewell today to musician John Lennon. Yoko Ono, Lennon's widow, had requested a 10-minute period of silence today in memory of the British singer killed by a gunman on Monday. We have reports. First, John Lawrence in Liverpool, where the Beatles began.
In the city where it all started over 20 years ago, more than 20,000 people paid tribute today to the local lad who first formed the rock and roll group that came to be called the Beatles. Liverpool honored John Lennon with a 6-hour service in the center of the city that included live music, speeches, and finally, prayers. Several fans were hurt or fainted from the crush of bodies. Generally, though, the mood was melancholy and warm. This evening, at the hour set by Lennon's widow, the thousands paid silent homage for 10 minutes. At the end, they sang, "Give Peace a Chance." In London, a few hundred people gathered along Abbey Road outside the old Beatles recording studios to mark the early evening vigil. Someone inside played a tape recording of some of Lennon's songs. As it has been all week in the country where he was born, the sense of sadness at Lennon's death has run very deep. John Lawrence, ABC News, London.
This is Richard Anderson in New York. One of the largest groups to pay tribute to John Lennon met at the Bandshell in Central Park. More than 100,000 followers from several generations gathered to share their grief and their emotions. Here, they listened to and sang music by the artist. The scene was repeated in the Midwest in Chicago's Lincoln Park. 10 minutes of silence is what Lennon's widow, Yoko Ono, asked for and got from people all over the country. In some cities, like Detroit, radio stations stopped playing music and went off the air for 10 minutes. Peace was a central theme to many of the Lennon compositions, so it seemed fitting that in Ottawa, Canada, there be more than 2,000 mourners at what is known as the Peace Monument. And in the bright sunshine of Southern California, thousands more gathered at Griffith Park in Los Angeles. Tonight in New York City, for the first time since John Lennon was murdered almost a week ago, there are no fans outside his West Side apartment. The only reminder of what has happened here is the presence of the guards, who now stand alone. Richard Anderson, ABC News, New York.
John Lennon's accused killer, Mark David Chapman, is locked up in isolation for his own protection in a New York jail. His attorney says Chapman refused to eat for 2 days from fear that other inmates might poison his food.
We at American Tourister know that when your suitcase is out of your hands, it's out of your hands. That's why American Tourister suitcases are reinforced with strong stainless steel frames and solid locks that won't spring open on contact. Sure, you may pay a little more in the beginning, but it'll sure pay in the end. American Tourister. It's not just how good it looks, it's how long it looks good.
While you're shopping for all those toys and electronic games and gifts, don't forget the battery that will make Christmas fun last. Rayovac Alkaline. Laboratory tests prove that in toys, tape recorders, cameras, and other battery-powered gifts, Alkaline is the longest-lasting type of battery you can buy. Switch to Rayovac Alkaline now. Rayovac Alkaline makes Christmas fun last, and last, and last.
Secretary of State Muskie returned to Washington tonight from Europe, feeling somewhat better about the tense situation along the Polish borders, where Russian troops have been massed and intervention has been feared. Barry Dunsmore reports.
Secretary Muskie returned to Washington feeling that the Atlantic Alliance was more united and that the chances of a Soviet invasion of Poland were a little less likely.